Welcome to our discussion on the Electoral College. Do you remember voting for the president in a mock election in elementary school or junior high? Maybe you selected your candidate at random because you didn't really know the difference between the two, or you didn't care. Well, now you're older and wiser and know that who you votes for does make a difference. Or does it? Take the Electoral College, for instance. Every 4 years, on the Tuesday after the first Monday of November, millions of U.S. citizens go to local voting booths to cast a vote for the next president and vice president of their country. Their votes are recorded and counted, and the winner is declared, unless the majority of Electoral College members vote for another candidate, of course. Truth is, the results of the popular vote are not guaranteed to stand because the presidential election is really decided by the votes of the Electoral College. Although this could feel as though your vote is about as decisive as those of an elementary school election, the Electoral College process was actually put in place to ensure a nationwide system of fairness. When you cast your vote for president, you also vote for an often unnamed elector who will cast a ballot in a separate election that ultimately will choose the president. For some of us, the Electoral College process and its outcome may seem a bit shocking. In the 2000 U.S. presidential election, for example, more Americans voted for Gore, but Bush actually won the presidency because he was awarded the majority of Electoral College votes. It's a political upset that's occurred several times since the first U.S. presidential election. 4 presidents have been elected by the Electoral College after losing the popular vote. By now, you're probably wondering how and why the Electoral College began. In 1787, 2 things forever changed the face of American politics. First, a group of national leaders drafted the U.S. Constitution, and second, they decided the average citizen wasn't erudite enough to elect a president without the bridge of a system known as the Electoral College. The Electoral College was created by the framers of the U.S. Constitution as a compromise for the presidential election process. At the time, some politicians believed a purely popular election was too reckless and would give too much voting power to highly populated areas in which people were familiar with a presidential candidate. Others objected to the possibility of letting Congress select the president, as some suggested. The answer? An electoral college system that allowed voters to vote for electors who would then cast their votes for candidates, a system described in Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution. The concept worked as expected until the election of 1800, when presidential hopefuls Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson each received the same amount of electoral votes. By then, political parties had become powerful influencers. Leaders of each party hand-picked electors who, naturally, voted for their electing party's candidates. The tie was broken by the House of Representatives, but resulted in the Constitution's 12th Amendment, which spelled out the electoral voting process in more detail. Today, each state has a number of electors equal to the number of its U.S. senators, 2 in each state, plus the number of its U.S. representatives, which varies according to the state's population. For example, Kansas has 2 senators and 4 U.S. representatives, for a total of 6 electoral votes. Overall, the Electoral College includes 538 electors, 535 for the total number of congressional members, and 3 who represent Washington, D.C., as allowed by the 23rd Amendment. In the 2012 presidential election, highly populated California had the most sway with 55 electoral votes. Other, less populated states, such as Montana, had as few as 3 electoral votes. On the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, the electors meet in their respective state capitals to officially cast their votes for president and vice president. These votes are then sealed and sent to the president of the Senate, who, on January 6th, opens and reads the votes before both houses of Congress. The winner is sworn into office at noon, January 20th. Why Tuesday? Why November? In the 18th century, when America first asked citizens to cast their ballots, its largely rural population needed a couple of days in the saddle to reach a polling place. As Sunday was mainly for church, Monday would not allow enough time to ride to the poll station, so Tuesday became the natural choice for voting. As for November, it made perfect sense for an agrarian society whose members were enjoying the lull between the harvest and the heavy snowfall. This is an electoral map that shows you the amount of electors in each state. You need a total of 270 to win out of the 538 Electoral College votes possible. So, it's presidential election day. You make a selection at your polling place, and with your resplendent "I voted" sticker, step into the November air, satisfied you've made your wishes known. But what if your vote, the one you thought you cast for a presidential candidate, was actually used to elect someone whose name you don't even know, who would cast a presidential vote on your behalf? This may sound bizarre, but this is exactly what takes place during a U.S. presidential election. By voting for a Republican presidential candidate, for example, you are really voting for a member of the Electoral College who is expected, but not required, to vote along party lines too. The votes of the Electoral College, comprised of 538 electors divvied up by state, elect the president weeks after the Americans vote in a presidential election. State legislatures are responsible for nominating electors. The process can actually differ from state to state. In general, though, the two most common ways are: the elector is nominated by his or her state party committee, perhaps to reward many years of service to the party, or the elector campaigns for a spot and the decision is made during a vote held at the state's party convention. Usually, electors are people who are politically active in their party, be it Democrat, Green, Libertarian, Republican, or Independent, or connected to the political arena. This includes political activists, party leaders, elected officials of the state, and even people who have personal or political ties to the presidential candidates. And while the Constitution makes no mention of qualifications that must be met to become an Electoral College member, it does determine an Electoral College member cannot be a member of Congress, a high-ranking U.S. official in a position of trust or profit, which refers to a member of Congress accepting an appointment to executive office, or someone who has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. So, could a member of the Electoral College, whom you've helped elect by casting your presidential vote, decide to support an opponent instead? The Electoral College members for each state are voted on by the state's residents on voting day. In some states, the electors' names are printed on the ballots directly under the presidential candidates' names or grouped by party somewhere else on the ballot. In other states, the names of Electoral College nominees are not even listed on the ballot. When you vote for a presidential and vice presidential candidate on the ballot, you are really voting for the electors of the political party or unaffiliated candidate by which they were nominated. Take the North Carolina General Statute 163-209, for example. A vote for the candidates for president and vice president named on the ballot is a vote for the electors. This is the case for 48 states. It's known as the winner-take-all system, where all electors go with the candidate who wins the popular vote regardless of how close the vote is. So if the Democratic candidate narrowly wins the popular vote in Texas, for instance, 38 Democratic electors, 38 being the total number of electoral votes in the state, will represent Texas as a voting bloc. The other system, known as the congressional district method, is observed in Maine and Nebraska. In these states, the vote is split between the electoral vote, which goes to the winner of the statewide popular vote, and the congressional district vote. The state is divided into congressional districts, each with one electoral vote. The winner of the popular vote in each district is awarded an electoral vote. Potentially, this could result in a divided electoral vote, but so far it has not happened in either state. Most of the time, electors cast their votes for the candidate who has received the most votes in the state he or she represents, or for the candidate affiliated with his or her political party. However, there have been times when electors have voted contrary to the people's decisions. When electors cast their vote without following the popular vote or their party vote, they are known as faithless electors. In response to faithless electors' actions, at least 24 states have created laws to enforce an elector's pledge to his or her party vote or the popular vote. Some states even assess a misdemeanor charge and a fine. For example, the state of North Carolina fines faithless electors $10,000. However, A number of scholars believe such state-level laws would not survive constitutional challenge. Of the 158 faithless electors, none have ever been punished. When there's an impasse in the Electoral College, the decision goes to the House of Representatives, which has happened twice. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, both Democrat-Republicans, received the same number of electoral votes, even though Burr was running as a vice presidential candidate. After 36 successive votes in the House, Jefferson was finally elected president. In 1825, Andrew Jackson received the popular vote over John Quincy Adams, but neither man received the electoral vote majority to claim the presidency. Adams won the House vote on the first ballot. In most presidential elections, the candidate who wins the popular vote will also receive the majority of the electoral votes. But this is not always the case. Some electors abstain from voting, while others vote differently than they pledged to vote. Despite 11th hour changes within the Electoral College, only 4 candidates in U.S. history have won an election by losing the popular vote and winning or deadlocking the electoral vote. 1824, John Quincy Adams, the son of former President John Adams, received 38,000 fewer votes than Andrew Jackson, but neither candidate won a majority of the Electoral College. Adams was awarded the presidency when the election was thrown to the House of Representatives. 1876. Nearly unanimous support from small states gave Rutherford B. Hayes a 1-vote margin in the Electoral College, despite the fact that he lost the popular vote to Samuel J. Tilden by 264,000 votes. Hayes carried 5 out of the 6 smallest states, excluding Delaware. These 5 states, plus Colorado, gave Hayes 22 electoral votes with only 109,000 popular votes. At the time, Colorado had just been admitted to the Union and decided to appoint electors instead of holding elections. So, Hayes won Colorado's 3 electoral votes with 0 popular votes. It was the only time in U.S. history that small state support had decided an election. 1888, Benjamin Harrison lost the popular vote by 95,713 votes to Grover Cleveland, but won the electoral vote by 65. In this instance, some say the Electoral College worked the way it is designed to work by preventing a candidate from winning an election based on support from one region of the country. The South overwhelmingly supported Cleveland, and he won by more than 425,000 votes in 6 southern states. However, in the rest of the country, he lost by more than 300,000 votes. In 2000, Al Gore received 50,992,335 votes nationwide, and George W. Bush received 50,455,156 votes. The race was so close in Florida that ineffectively punched ballots known as hanging chads, which we discussed earlier, required a manual recount because the voter intent couldn't be deciphered by the machine. Eventually, Bush was awarded the state of Florida by the U.S. Supreme Court and had a total of 271 electoral votes, which beat Gore's 266 electoral votes. Today, a candidate must receive 270 of the 538 votes to win the election. In cases where no candidate wins a majority of electoral votes, the decision is thrown to the House of Representatives by virtue of the 12th Amendment. The House then selects the president by majority vote, with each state delegation receiving 1 vote to cast for the 3 candidates who received the most electoral votes. Proponents of the Electoral College say the system serves its purpose, despite the fact that the candidate who wins the popular vote doesn't always win the election. The Electoral College is a block or weighted voting system designed to give more power to the states with even more votes, but allows small states to swing an election, as happened in 1876. Under this system, each state is assigned a specific number of votes proportional to its population, so that each state's power is representative of its population. So, while winning the popular vote may not ensure a candidate's victory, a candidate must gain popular support of a particular state to win the votes in that state. The goal of any candidate is to put together the right combination of states to earn 270 electoral votes. As the 2000 election approached, some observers thought that Bush, the son of a former president, could win the popular vote, but that his opponent Gore could win the Electoral College vote because Gore was leading in certain big states, such as California, New York, and Pennsylvania. In the end, Gore secured the popular vote, but Bush won by securing the majority of votes in the Electoral College. Since then, a push to reform the Electoral College has been gaining steam. As of October 2012, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Vermont, Washington, and the District of Columbia have passed legislation that mandates Electoral College votes go to the presidential candidate who wins the national popular vote. In addition, Colorado and Rhode Island have passed a similar bill through both houses, and 10 other states have passed a reform bill through one house. Still, more states are introducing an Electoral College reform bill or discussing it in committee. To many, aligning the electoral vote with the popular vote seems like a valid solution. Others believe there must be a better way to select a president than by popular vote alone. Otherwise, small states or states with sparse populations won't be equally represented. While the future of the Electoral College may be uncertain, one thing isn't up for grabs. It's likely to be a controversial subject well into the future.
Pursuant to the Constitution and laws of the United States, the Senate and the House of Representatives are meeting in joint session to verify their certificates and count the votes of the electors of the several states for President and Vice President of the United States.
In 1950, the decision was made to give the Electoral College responsibility to the National Archives and Records Administration to be administered by the Office of the Federal Register.
So this is a meeting of the presidential electors as they officially cast Maryland's electoral votes for president and vice president.
When Americans vote at the general election, we're actually voting for a slate of electors. We're not voting for the candidates. Generally, they're people who are very active in their political parties within their states, but usually on the state's ballot, those slates of electors are represented by the candidates. Each state gets one elector per member of Congress. So, for example, Maryland has 2 senators and 8 members of the House. So it gets 10 total electoral votes. It's a winner-take-all system.
I, Beth Scroby, vote for Barack Obama for president.
Barack Obama for president.
In each state, all the electors vote for the candidate who won the popular vote in that state. After the electors meet and they vote, they'll send a package to us. That package will contain a certificate of ascertainment and the state certificate of vote. The certificate of ascertainment just lists the number of votes each electoral slate got and tells you who won. The certificate of vote tells us how each elector voted. We review them to make sure that they have a seal, that they're signed. The Constitution says that people who are in Congress can't be electors. Sometimes we notice that they've listed somebody who's a member of the House or a member of the Senate, and then we contact the state and tell them that that person cannot be an elector. Today is the day before Congress counts the votes. A couple of the states actually had the wrong date for the inauguration, and so we asked them for amended certificates of vote. We just received our amended certificate of vote. What we'll do is just review it quick, and then as soon as we're done here, I will take it up to Congress.
The next step is to scan the documents, and then we send it forward to our web programmer, who would then post it on our website so the public can actually view the document.
There are no federal requirements on what certificates look like. This is this year's Ohio certificate. It's still the biggest, it's just a little smaller than 2008.
The certificate of electoral vote in the state of Ohio seems to be regular, uniform, and authentic.
House will be in order.
The certificates are brought down the aisle in ceremonial boxes and presented to the tellers who are going to open the boxes and count the votes.
For someone to be elected President of the United States, they need to receive 270 electoral votes, which is half of the total plus 1. After the 2000 election, Vice President Al Gore, in his capacity as President of the Senate, had to make the announcement to a joint session of Congress that he had lost the Electoral College.
George W. Bush of the state of Texas has received for President of the United States 271 votes. Al Gore of the state of Tennessee has received 266 votes.
The Office of the Federal Register maintains the certificates of ascertainment and the certificates of vote for 1 year after the election. We make them available to the public for review and inspection. After 1 year's time, they are transferred to the National Archives as permanent records.